All right, we're going to get into chapter 33, 34, 35, 36, and 37, and 38 in this one video. Again, because of the sheer amount of information that's covered in this one section, each chapter could easily be a semester or a 4-week intensive course. So we have to kind of bring some of these latter chapters into just one or a few videos. So in chapter 33, we're going to look at figure 33.6 and figure 33.7. All of these PowerPoints are going to be on Canvas that you can refer to. So just move ahead to figure 33.6 and 33.7. We're going to look at the Taj Mahal. Now during this time, it's going to be the Mughal Empire, Mughal, and it's going to be under the Babur, or also known as Tiger in Arabic, the Tiger ruler, or the Babur ruler. And he's the one who established the Mughal Empire and essentially gave rise to the artistry that came through the Mughal Empire at this time. And we're talking about Asia and Southeast Asia, and in particular India here, because it's going to be underneath this Moorish or Islamic rule versus that of the Hindu rule prior to, or even earlier than that, and even different sects to this day, like the Vaishnava in particular. So what's going on with the Taj Mahal is it is Islamic. Okay, the design is Islamic. It's not Hindu, it's Islamic, though it's in India. And the Hindus as well as the Buddhists were not known for large monumental architecture. The Buddhists do have the stupa, the great stupa, but it is nowhere in size in comparison to this monumental architecture as the Taj Mahal. So it's going to be the Mughals or the Islamic rule that's going to set precedent of large monumental, or that's kind of redundant, but monumental architecture in India and in Asia and Southeast Asia in particular. The Taj Mahal is a mausoleum in memory of the Shah Jahan's favorite wife, and it ultimately became his tomb as well. And that's what a mausoleum is. It's a tomb that actually has the body of the individual, the Shah, as well as his favorite wife's body present inside, entombed in the Taj Mahal. The dome is on a cube center, so know that it's a very specific kind of dome that's on a cube center versus what we looked at with the dome of the Pentateuch in regards to Hagia Sophia in chapter no, I'm so sorry. Where did we look at the dome of the Pentateuch? I think it's somewhere in chapter 14 it came up. But anyway, this is new, so this is going to be a dome that's actually present on top of this cubic-like similar center, which is very similar to these older Islamic mausoleums in the past prior to the Mughal Empire running the show in India, if you will. So it's an older style that's being kind of updated a little bit during this time, during the Mughal rule in India. It has new techniques in the relief making and the surface ornamentation that is on the exterior of the architecture, and it's what makes the Taj Mahal look weightless visually. So if you look in at figure 33.7 or zoom into figure 33.6, you can see that this ornamentation and this inlay of precious gems, as well as carving away at the surface of the Taj Mahal, gives it this feeling of airiness or light or weightlessness visually. It appears as if it's floating, which it actually is, separated by a moat of water that goes all the way around, and it was the architect's intention to make sure that as you're coming to it in the front, which is figure 33.6, that there's no staircase. It looks as if it is floating, almost like in this spiritual realm beyond that of the material realm, and it's intentionally designed that way. And there is, of course, a stair system that takes you in, but it's kind of to the side, not present whenever you first visually approach it. So it's meant to have a very kind of spiritual-like essence to it. Um, yeah, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more here in a second. Um, and oh yeah, right now actually. So the Charbagh, which is CHAR hyphen BAGH, is a 4-point system that reflects and symbolizes the Quranic Garden of Paradise. Okay, so according to the Quran, which is the biblical scripture in Islam, that there is a garden of paradise, and the Taj Mahal has these 4-point systems that you see there, with which are actually the minarets that are the 4-point systems, and the minaret is the place of calling for worship to Allah, and Allah is the name of God in Islam. So at those 4 points, it's called a charbagh, which is CHAR hyphen BAGH, and it's a 4-point system that's supposed to reflect that Quranic Garden of Paradise. So it's meant to have this dovetailed approach to a place in the spiritual world versus that of the material world, and that's why it's designed in this fashion. It also has standard iwans, which are precious stone and inlay window-like units that you see in figure 33.7. I'm not looking at a PowerPoint for this, I'm looking actually at the book. So figure 33.7, and you can see that they are inlays of precious stone within this window, and they're on all 8 sides, and that specific type of inlay is called, well, first of all, let me spell Iwans. It's IWANS. So what you see in figure 33.7 is an Iwan, and there's 8 of them. And that specific type of inlay is called a pietra dura, Pietra space Dura, pietra dura, and it's an inlay. And it has the pointed arches that you see that are slightly flattened in the Iwans. It doesn't go up to a point like we saw in late medieval art in chapter 14, which is again this pointed system that's supposed to take you up to the higher atmospheric placements within the cathedral in the Gothic period and late medieval period. And they kind of took that from the Islamic patterns that we saw in some of the older mosque, which is covered in Art History 141. But here, that pointed system is intentional in figure 33.7, and they have those pointed arches so that it leads your eye up to the dome. All right, it takes you up to the dome, and then the dome again is pointed itself. So it's a very patternized system of geometric pattern of visual aesthetics to kind of keep bringing your eye up to the high points. So it's meant to be very unified in that fashion. Um, and it has all encompassing proportions mathematically, with the 3 smaller domes that create this equilateral triangle that is one on the back side that we can't see on figure 33.6, and then 2 in the front that you can see. And it's believed that 2 of those tombs, the ones in the front, are the 2 of the domes, the ones in the front are actually meant to be the tombs of the Shah and his favorite wife, and the one in the back is meant to be the madrasa, which is the school. That's Madrasa, and that 3rd dome in the back is meant to be the top part of the madrasa, which is the school for Islamic studies. Okay. So that is the piece that we're going to talk about in chapter 33. And now we're going to talk about chapter 34, and we're going to refer to the Jin Dezin porcelain in particular. And that page that I want you, well, we're going to look at that, and then we're also going to look at Xiao's Guillaume Gongsun. So let's look at the porcelain first, and it's going to be figure 34.5, and it's the Jingdezhen porcelain. And what they were known for in China from this time is the mastery of porcelain. All right, so your fine porcelain. And this place in particular in China is known for There's specific type of kilns which are known as, well, some of us may call them ovens, but they're kilns that are meant to take porcelain to a very, very high temperature and make them what is called vitrified. And after vitrified, then they can be used. But it's a very difficult porcelain to use in this area, and they mastered it. And actually, to this day, well, pre-COVID, I should say, I mean, I think it's reopening. There's a artist in residency available for ceramicists around the world to go and actually present their ideas, to live there for a couple months, design a body of work or a series of work that actually goes towards a mastery level of porcelaneous clay projects that the Chinese in Jindazin actually will assist and help in the overall projects coming to completion. So it's opened up its gates, if you will, to the world, and it's allowed anybody from around the world to come in and participate in the using and the making of this incredible porcelain that's been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And an example of that is the David vases, which again is figure 34-5. And they're the best surviving examples from the original Zhong period, and they were made for the Ming Dynasty. Okay, so Ming Dynasty, which is one of the leading dynasties in China. And these specific David vases were an altar set for a Taoist temple. All right, so a very prominent religion within China. More of a philosophy than a religion. It's more about a way of life than that of an actual scripted or an actual scripture-based religion. So if you look up Taoism, Daoist, it will let you know a little bit more about why certain precious materials such as these porcelaneous vases, the David vases, figure 34.5, were used in those temples. Now, what's really specific about this is not only the clay itself and how they fired the clay in their kilns with the porcelain, but also the surface decoration. If you look at the surface decoration of the David vases, they have what's called a blue cobalt underglaze, and cobalt is spelled C-O-B-A-L-T. It's a natural occurring metallic, an oxide that occurs naturally in the earth. There's also a carbonate, which is a derivative of the oxide that's used to give you these deep, rich blues on the surface of the clay bodies whenever you apply them with brushwork. So a cobalt blue underglaze. And on these, because they were going into a Taoist temple, on the surface of these they had auspicious symbols, which you can see in the figure of 34-5, which is that of the phoenix and the dragon, and then there's also the elephant handles. And all three of those animals are considered very auspicious, the phoenix, the dragon, as well as that of the elephant for the Chinese. In particular, the phoenix and the dragon, in that they're supposed to reflect the counterparts of masculine and feminine energies, or active and passive energies. So the dragon is meant to be the active masculine energy, and then the phoenix is meant to be the passive feminine energy. Okay, so auspicious. They're meant to be made for these auspicious occurrences and placements in these different temples and such, and that's how the David vases were used. Alright, now we're going to switch gears to Korea, same chapter, and we're going to look at figure 3420, and it's Seon's Gagamengansen, which is a ink and an ink painting on paper. Okay, so ink painting on paper, or it's a liquid drawing, I should say. It's not a painting. It's a liquid drawing. Liquid drawing, not painting. It's a drawing, but it's using liquid media versus dry medium. Okay, so it's a liquid drawing. That's what an ink drawing is on paper. So the Koreans at this time were very interested in similar subject matter as the Chinese. and in particular the Ming and the Qing dynasties. Okay, so this piece, figure 3420, Guillaume Ganson, is a study of the Diamond Mountains, and it's specifically a mountain range that's right at the cusp of what is present day North Korea and South Korea, which I believe is the 38th parallel whenever it comes to the longitudinal lines, or the longitudinal or I think it's longitudinal lines. But anyway, it's a mountain range that is presently the point of separation between North and South Korea, called the Diamond Mountains. Now they're learning about this type of painting or this type of drawing from the Chinese, which is these landscape drawings, and they're taking the technique from the Chinese called a true view. A true view. That's TRUE space VIEW. A true view. And what this is the use of sharper and darker fibrous brush strokes the Chinese use to better depict the spiky forms of the mountains and the crystalline appearance of those diamond mountains in particular. All right, so by focusing on that Chinese study coming from the Ming and Qing dynasties, they're taking these landscape focuses, and they are rendering what's called this true view. So these mountains are a true view, and they're using the techniques that they learned from the Chinese, those use of sharper and darker fibrous brush strokes, to depict the spiky forms and the crystalline like appearance of the diamond mountains that are found in Korea. All right, so that's how the Chinese and the Koreans have worked together in these techniques in chapter 34. All right, so let's go on and move over to Japan, chapter 35, and then we'll probably do a second really short video on Native American as well as Oceanic and African art to conclude the rest of this. So we're going to look at figure, and it's going to be Hokusai, and it's going to be figure 3514. Hokusai, figure 3514, 3514. And Hokusai and the Japanese at this time are actually going to learn, just like the Koreans learned from the Chinese in the Ming and Qing dynasties, the Japanese are going to learn from the Koreans and the Chinese. Okay, so it's going to kind of derivative its way from China to Korea and then to Japan. And so what Hokusai is going to do is he's going to learn the landscape painting techniques from China and Korea first. And then it's going to become very popular in around 1800 in Japan. So around 1800 it became very popular, and that's around the time that this print is going to be developed, 1833. Okay, it's a woodblock print, and if you remember with Dürer in particular, when we started getting into the Renaissance, we were talking about woodcut, which is you take a piece of wood and you carve into it, and you have to do the image that you want, you have to do in the inverse. And where you carve into it, the deeper you carve into it, the darker the ink is going to get, and then the more superficial the carved line is going to be on the surface, the more subtle the line is going to be. All right, so it's called a woodblock cut. And then after you lay the ink inside of the wood, then you put the piece of paper on top, you roll over it, and then you pull it off, and then the inverse image will be present for you to see. So this is called the Great Wave of Kanagawa, and it's from the woodblock series called 36 Views of Mount Fuji. Okay, so it's from a series of 36 views. And if you look at it, you can see Mount Fuji is there, but it's very diminutive in comparison to the actual oceanic scene, landscape scene that's actually occurring within the Great Wave. And that's intentional. And the reason it's intentional is because the wave dwarfs Mount Fuji in the background. And the reason it's dwarfing it is because it's trying to put an emphasis on the white caps of the wave, to show that they're more ominous than that of the fact that Fuji was an active volcano. All right. So they're trying to show that the powers of the ocean are actually greater than that of the oceanic or that of the volcanic activities of Mount Fuji. So it's a nice contrast because Mount Fuji is very, very, very powerful, but these waves are showing even a stronger presence than that of Fuji, being in the background, and almost looks as if this oceanic wave is coming down to crush Mount Fuji. So with it being an active volcano during these times, it was really impressive to see this woodblock showing a dwarfing action towards Mount Fuji versus activating it and making it seem like it's the powerful source. So it's this kind of, um, and what we talked about with the Shinto sculpture in the last video, it's that, we're all part of this nature, and using the imagery of the ocean being more powerful visually than that of Mount Fuji is very much part of being equated to be intertwined with nature. Um, it does have a combination of Eastern and Western techniques. Hokusai was actually trained in some of the Western techniques of artistry, as well as the Chinese and Korean techniques of landscape painting and drawing. And how that is combined is the Western elements that are very prominent is the use of what's called the Prussian blue. So the blue that's used here as the ink for this printmaking process, the woodblock process, is very Western. Also, the low horizon, having the horizon very low, just below the cap of Mount Fuji, is very much a Western technique that is derived all the way back to some of the painted styles of the Renaissance. And then what's very Eastern about it is obviously the landscape imagery itself, but also the flat triangulated waves that we see. So they do have curvaceous elements to them, but if you look in the foreground where there's a wave that hasn't quite crested up to a large colliding wave yet, that's still going up and down and undulating, that triangulation of the wave and making it flat and not giving it a lot of definition is a very Eastern approach, a very Japanese approach, a very Chinese and Korean and Japanese approach, but specifically a very Japanese approach. Okay. All right, so I'll leave it at that, and then we'll move into chapters 36 through 38 in the next video. All right.